Attention! The National Weather Service has issued a hurricane warning for the entirety of the National Hockey League. Please stay tuned for further information from the Storm Cellar.
Welcome back. Another edition of the Storm Cellar. We're starting to roll back into weekly podcast, which means, as always, I am joined by my good buddy Ray, who is up nice and early after a long night of Dungeons and Dragons character building. That's always a fun one, right?
Character building is the best. The character building isn't just great for a hockey team and building character amongst your players. It's great for Dungeons and Dragons as well. And yes, I'm one of the biggest dorks you're ever going to hear.
Can I throw you under the bus for 2 seconds?
You absolutely can. 100% you can.
He hasn't seen Stranger Things, y'all. He didn't realize that the Stranger Things Dungeons and Dragons tie-in existed, but he does now. He does now. So we'll get him on the bandwagon there too.
100%. You know what? It's great to be back to these weekly events. What's even better, though, Brad, is that we're filling up with the guests. It's like we put out the sign that says, the Storm Cellar is open, and now the guests are ready to join us. And joining us today, Daniel Wagner. Daniel, how you doing this morning?
Welcome.
It's doing all right. It's pretty sunny here in Rayford, North Carolina right now. So
there you go. Good stuff. Now, look, you've heard the program, and for those of our listeners who are just kind of new to the show, first of all, welcome. But second, we start out every program wanting to find out what makes our guests tick. Why are you a Caniac? Why are you a jerk like the two of us? Love to hear your history, your whole story of how you got on with the team. If you have favorite players from past, present, it's all to you. We're throwing everything on you. Away you go. Take us into the show.
Yeah, just 30 minutes or less. Everything. We want to hear everything.
We want to hear everything.
It just has to be in 30 minutes or less.
I think I could beat 30 minutes, but
I probably couldn't.
I don't know if I could.
My wife and I are relatively new Carolina Hurricanes fans. Last year, just in general, was a big year because I retired from the Army. You'll hear me say military a lot because I started out in the Air Force and I switched over to the Army. So I retired after 21 years.
Thank you for that.
Oh, trust me, I couldn't think of anything better to do after high school. So
indeed, thank you.
The big thing that I wanted to do, because I was here in North Carolina, was to go see a Carolina Hurricanes game, because I think I came back from the Middle East at the end of 2019. And Ayers was kind of big on the news whenever he stepped in. And I was like, I really need to go see the Carolina Hurricanes. So the Canes had a promotion, $25 tickets, and it happened to be a matinee game for Halloween. And I was like, well, that gives me time to go watch a game, come back, hand out candy to kids, because it was the first year last year that we were actually able to give kids candy. And my wife and I went, and it was against the Coyotes. And the jersey I'm wearing is Seth Jarvis, which that was his first game. And we were just hooked.
Nice.
I mean, the little games in between the periods that they did, the entertainment. Knowing that the Coyotes weren't going to be super competitive, they actually put goals up, and it became a kind of a hairy situation for a little bit of the game.
That was a tight contest. It sure was.
And it was. My wife and I looked at her. I was like, you know what? We need to go to one more game before we decide we're going to be season ticket members. And I contacted the Canes about packages at that point. And the following game we went to was against the LA Kings right before they shut down. Because the next game would have been against the Nashville Predators, and that game was canceled because of COVID. And so we went to that one, and that was whenever my wife really, she was kind of enjoying it, but then I started pointing out between Ethan Bear and Brandon Lemieux the every time Lemieux got on the ice, Bear would jump back out on a pairing and he would immediately stick check him and let him know he was there. And she started to realize that the battles in the game, like the middle game, was very entertaining to watch, even if you're not watching the puck. So she was sold at that point. She's like, go ahead and buy some season tickets. So we got the 11 game package because we didn't know with the hour and a half trip up to Raleigh and back if that was going to be feasible. And then, playoffs came around. We renewed for a full season this upcoming year. So I got the option to do the pay as you play. And we went to every single playoff game, and it was amazing. Like that was whenever we were like, okay, because having home ice advantage, it was game, day off, game. Then they're on the road. Then you come back, game. Then they're day off, they're on the road, come back, another game. And it was just where it's like, yeah, we could do this. We could do a full season.
Yeah. And like it's another level too, right? Like the intensity of the playoffs, like everything is heightened.
Oh, it was insane, especially like granted, I saw a lot of wins at home on ice, except for the last game.
Yeah.
But it was just insane, just one, how loud it was. I told my wife before, I was like, hey, I brought hearing protection. It's gonna be loud in here. Like, and I put it in like during warm-ups, I put my hearing protection in. And she was like, okay, whatever. So she puts it in like before the anthem and everything starts. And at the end of the game, you take out your hearing protection. It's still really loud in there when people are leaving. It's like, yeah, it's loud. Then she forgot hearing protection one night, and she was like, yeah, my ears were ringing after we left. I was like, yeah, it's legit. Like this place, not anything to mess with when it comes to noise.
Fans of other teams always want to say the noise is piped in, or there's some other reason. It's like it is an acoustically advantageous building, but it's the loudness of the building is fan generated. That's no joke.
There's no question. And my trip in 2009 when I got a chance to go down to Raleigh to see a couple of games, it was loud, but it was not anywhere like this. Was in the middle of the season, right? And you could just see it's like that they turn up the dial, you know what I mean? They're at their loudest, they're already at 10, right? But then in the playoffs, you kind of go to like 15, maybe 20. It just kind of keeps going and going. It's unbelievable what a great experience it is.
I mean, I really hope the Canes organization's listening, because like anytime they put that decibel meter up, that's when people got louder. So if they want them to get louder, if they just throw that decibel meter up like right at a goal, right when a goal is scored, like the best example was against the Rangers in game 1 when Aho went and tied the game in the third period. Like obviously the Rangers fans that are sitting in front of me are like pretty much like celebrating that this game's they're gonna win, and they played a great game. But when Aho decided it was in his court, he was going to take total control of it and scored that goal, that place went nuts. Like the lid got lifted off. And I was like, man, if they just leave that decibel meter up, at certain points, people see it and they respond to it like, oh, I need to get louder. And that's pretty, because like everyone, it's like a game. You want to see how high we can get it. So I'm going to scream louder.
Yeah, that's why the PNC needs a few $1 million in roof repairs.
No kidding.
It's not age. It's vibration and
I can't tell. So like where I sit is in 329. I love the 300 seats. If I move anywhere, it'll probably be 200, just because they have cushions, which is kind of a nice, like I sat in a 200 seat. I was like, oh, this is really nice. These seats are amazing. But the 300 level, I mean, it's just, you as a season ticket member, you may have people that you sit next to, or they might be like an 11 game package like me, and you just get random people from time to time. And that always makes it interesting. During the playoffs, it was great because I had like the same people for most of the games, and then the guys behind me, I mean, every time Jake Gardner's name came up, they cheered. They were like, he's the MVP of the season, he's the reason why we have Domi. And they're just naming all the players that Gardner was huge for assisting to be on our team. And I was just like, man, these guys are crazy. They were an absolute riot the whole time.
Yeah, I was going to say my season tickets were in the 300s. I thought it was a great experience up there. I like to tell newer folks as fans. So if anybody listen, a lot of our people that listen are newer to hockey. Your first game or two, sit as close to the ice as you can get. It won't be the best views, but when the puck is in your area, you'll get a real sense of speed and physicality, and you'll understand these guys are much faster than they appear on TV, and going to the boards really is a body shaking kind of thing. Then kind of once you start to understand the game, move up, right? Whether 200s, 300s, because then now you're kind of getting over you, right? Now you can see the game. You don't have to be focused on the puck. You can watch, like you said, the things, the battles in the boards, what's trailing, what's going on behind the play, how the setup looks, and you get a much better, kind of bird's eye view of kind of what's going on, to me sitting further up. So like when I take new people, like I said, I always try and sit front, first two rows if at all possible. But for me, I would much rather sit up a little bit. And you do get some real characters up in the 300s. I mean, you get some down low too, but you definitely get some characters up in the 300s.
Yeah, they're definitely worth the entertainment. I think I won't say I've had every kind of fan sitting next to me, because I've had some really interesting ones. Like you always have the toppers every once in a while that sit behind you, two dudes just telling stories, trying to one up each other, just sitting behind you, and you're just like sitting there in the game, like, come on, man, just stop talking, just stop,
just enjoy the game, guys.
That every once in, like against the Rangers, I had tickets the first time. It was in March that I got to see the Rangers. So like I had a Ranger fan sitting right next to me, and there was Ranger fans all around me, but I actually was holding a conversation with them because we were coming up to the trade deadline. I was like, these pieces would fit. And then teams that we thought were kind of like on the edge of being potentially scary at the time. And we had a decent conversation, and it wasn't like, oh, I hate the Canes and this and that. They were just like, he was just glad that one, he lives in North Carolina, because taxes are pretty nice here. I don't know if you guys
most
know
Ranger
that.
fans do.
Yeah, I mean, the taxes are pretty good. So they live here. He just took the opportunity to come up to see the game. And same thing with the Boston fans. Like, they live here because taxes are pretty high around in Massachusetts, DC area. So they like to come here visit to see a cheaper game, essentially. Yeah, actually get good tickets.
Yeah, it's for the playoffs this year. It would have been cheaper for me to fly to North Carolina and get a seat in Raleigh than it would have been for me to get a good ticket here in Boston at the Boston Garden. So,
and it's just all about the economy and the people around it. So, the game in North Carolina is good. Like if you go to the PNC Arena, I don't think that there's a bad seat. I can tell you from experience that I feel like the 300 seats on the shoot twice side feel a little wider than the shoot twice side on the visitor side. It feels like there's like a quarter of an inch, maybe a half inch more space in that seat. It's just it might be just psychological, just being closer, but like, yeah,
it could be, but you know what, you just never know with these things. And I gotta ask, who's your guy? Do you have an emotional connection to anyone on the team?
So I really like Jarvis a lot. Mainly, I mean, I think it's just because I saw his first game, and then I was like, that was the person I kind of gravitated to, especially whenever I found out he was 19. I mean, at 19, I was joining the Air Force. I was heading off to San Antonio to basic training. This kid's, rubbing elbows with grown men and chasing them around. And like, if you ever watch the guy, especially if you come to a game, because like my wife found out during the playoffs that she did not like watching hockey on television because you're fixed in one view. Whatever they want to show you, they're showing you. Whereas you can have ADD and come to a hockey game and sit in the arena, and there's a lot to watch on the ice. And she just absolutely disliked that. But like whenever you watch Jarvis, and I want to point out Game 5 against the Rangers, when Jarvis was on the ice in the last like minute and a half, he stayed on longer to push the puck further into the Rangers end, and he was just an absolute menace. They were trying to move the puck around, and next thing you know, Jarvis is there pestering that guy, and it allowed the line change to come out. I'd want to say KK's line came out to where he could get off the ice, but he was anywhere that puck went, Jarvis was there. He was like a magnet. So it's amazing to watch how from the first game to where he was at that point prior to the hit, because obviously I was there when Trouba put the hit on him, and that happened so fast I didn't really even see the hit. I just was like, we just got too many men. And then next thing I know, I don't see Jarvis on the bench. Everyone's talking about it, and I was like, all right. So I'm going to Twitter trying to see the hit, and no one shared it right away. It took about 10-15 minutes for me to see what happened. And then, I listened to his exit interview and how he talked about it. And it's a whole nother level of like, people around you will pretty much like kind of feed into your emotions. Like Brad Marchand, anytime he touched the puck, Eric Hula, every time he touched the puck, he was booed. Like if they dislike him, like they make you want to hate them too. But, and in your mind, you're like, Brad Marchand is like, to us, he's a villain, but in Boston, he's like a savior. People love him. It's like everybody's villain is somebody else's hero. And I try not to like be like, oh, I hate this guy.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. Marchand, and you go back to guys like, even going way back in the time machine, like, Kenny Linsman, and I'll stay in the Boston theme, players that you absolutely hated but wished you had on your team. You know what I mean? And that's just that's the role that he takes in the whole thing, and he loves it. And I mean, he's an outstanding player, but he just makes you mental. You know what I mean? Like, he just, everything about him, something just crazy. And you're picking up on Jarvis. It's the game within the game, right? Yes, there's the grand scheme of what's going on, but when you focus in on those individuals, you get that real appreciation. And that's one of the things I love about Jarvis. He is so tenacious, right? And I'm out here, stop me. I mean, like, yeah. That's how he is. Yep. He's great.
I can't wait for him to put on, 20 more pounds of muscle and just fill out, because he's, still at 19, 20, still a growing kid, right? So
I mean, 100%. I've told people, I was like, wait until, I mean, as a male, you don't reach peak strength until you're in your like at the like into 20s, into your 30s. Like that's your peak strength. Like he's not even in his prime yet. So if he's fortunate enough to play as long as like Jordan Staal, like he's gonna be a beast. Like it's can't miss with him. Same thing with Svechnikov. I mean, like he's not even at his strongest, guys. That's people have to really
22.
Yeah, you got to focus in on the fact that these guys are not like, they're not as strong as they can be, but their skill, I mean, it's just like you can see them getting smarter throughout the season. That was the cool thing about having season tickets, and I'm looking forward to it this upcoming year, because prior to last year, the only hockey I really ever watched, my dad was he was from Alpena, Michigan, and he was a Red Wings fan. And thankfully there towards the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s, the Red Wings just became like a machine, and we watched the playoffs. Like it wasn't like random, like on all the time, because whenever you're in Florida, I mean, it's pretty much football, baseball. Hockey wasn't too big. The Panthers were around. That was before the Lightning, because I mean, I joined the military in 2000, so a lot of things happened leading up to that. And for a long time I was like, oh, I guess I'm a Florida Panthers fan, and thankfully that didn't pan out. So I did get to catch one of the cool things, whatever I figured out that I could do a back-to-back was we watched Calgary, And then the next night we watched the Florida Panthers, and it was free hockey against the Florida Panthers, and we could win into overtime. And that was the first time I'd seen 3-on-3. And it's hard to explain to people, like, when you see 3-on-3 hockey, there's a lot of empty space on the ice. And if you're over aggressive and you miss the opportunity that you had, it easily goes the other way. And that's what happened that night. And 3-on-3 hockey is amazing if you get the opportunity.
And one part of me doesn't like 3-on-3 hockey deciding games because of that reason, right? It's so open, but I also like Olympic style skating, skillful hockey. So in some ways I do. And I remember it was the Calgary game, right? 3-on-3 overtime, and Aho gets the puck, and you just see him make this little move right around center ice, and I go, he's just going to go put it in because he just decided, like, I'm done for the night. I'm just going to go win the game right now. And he skates down, wins it, hands up right in their face. And that's one of the cool things I think that I do like about 3-on-3 hockey is because there's that space. The guys who have skill can just say, oh, I'm just going to use that, and I'm just going to basically just make you try and stop me. And there's a good chance you can't, right? So I like that it gives those kind of players those opportunities to really demonstrate what I like about hockey. I mean, do I like big hits? I like big legal hits, right? I don't like seeing guys, Trouba, put it's shoulder to shoulder, and I'm just happen to be falling through, rising up through somebody's head and jaw. Like I've never liked that, but I like big hits. But I would much rather see a Zegras or a Svechnikov or somebody doing these things that are new to us. I like watching the videos of, like, the kids, right? The 8, 9, 10, 12-year-olds who are seeing the NHL do this, and they're starting to try those kind of things. Not that we just want a bunch of hot dogging, but it's cool to see kids go, we can change the game, right? We can do things nobody's ever thought about. Because, you take a legend like a Gordie Howe, and, Gordie's going to come at you with an elbow. But these new guys, like, if they get around the elbow, Gordie can't stop them. I'm sorry. Like, they can do too much. The puck is just an extension of themselves. And it wasn't that way for so long in hockey, that they can do these things that just blow your mind. And these older style, slower, hard-hitting pylons can't keep up, right? That's why things like early 2000s trap hockey don't exist, because it just doesn't work the same way anymore. Love it. Love the evolution.
Yeah, it's definitely is, from the way I see the game being new to it. It was hard trying to pick up, like, why are they dumping the puck? Like, those are the things and then, I asked Shane Willis on theirs and on their podcast, and he answered, you're whenever you dump the puck, you're normally tossing it in to a position of strength because you have players on the other side, or you're doing, like, you see it a lot during line changes. They'll dump the puck, one person will drive in deep, allow the line change to happen, then they'll step off. But that's things, whenever you're first watching hockey, you don't really understand, like, hey, why are they doing this? Because it moves so fast. Now the game's slowed down to me to where I can see the strategy, and then the game within the game, the people, what they're doing in between the line battles. Like, because especially at home, you always see last change, so the people that are on the ice are the ones that are meant to be there for those moments. So it definitely is interesting to see the strategy that goes into hockey.
And I wonder. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay. I was going to say, I wonder, and I think this is true for a lot. I think being a newer fan, you're speaking for a lot of people saying, I'm new to hockey. Like, why are they just throwing the puck away? And I think it's so much that comes from, as Americans, things like football are, like, just in your face all the time. Even if you're not a football fan, like, you probably know a little bit about American football because it's just omnipresent. And that's one of the things where, like, no, you always want control, right? And the idea of giving up control is, it's like sacrilegious. Like, why would you just give up the puck? And it's like, but they're not just giving up the puck, right? It's done, like Shane said, for very specific reasons. And sometimes you lose those, but the Canes are the teams who can take advantage of that. And I think it's just a shift in perceptions from what so many of us grew up with watching certain sports. Baseball is a little different because you're either on offense or defense, right? But at least in football, like, you would never, like, just lateral the ball out in open space and hope your guy gets it. Like, that would never ever happen because it's too big of a risk. But in hockey, we do those types of things all the time. So
you learn about those. You learn about those phrases like dump and chase, right? Dump and chase hockey. All sorts of little different styles of play and strategies of play. There's the guys that can carry it in. One of the things that has changed over time, and someone like me who's watched hockey for 40 plus years, that pass when you're just about to enter the zone, you got the puck, and then that little pass back to your own blue line for the next guy coming in. It took me forever to understand, what the heck are you guys trying to do here? Can you just carry it in, or can you just give it a little flip and skate, keep going forward, stop trying to dump it back? It just felt like there was opportunities where if someone on the defensive end anticipated that back pass and made a break for it, could cause all sorts of trouble. And you look at turnovers, and we've seen those kind of things before where you're passing backwards to no one. We had a couple of guys that did that a few too many times.
Yeah, we should talk about one of those guys today.
We will, and we absolutely will. So yeah, well, you know what? That's exactly how we'll play this. We're going to move on to get out of my frustration and into what's happened in the past week. And it's been a busy one and a tumultuous
busier than
one.
most of us would have liked, I think.
Yeah, a lot busier than most of us would have liked. Brad, this is going to sound strange. I'm going to out myself on this because of what I said to you and what I texted to you on the second that this happened. Max Pacioretty, in a bizarre training incident of sorts. We don't know we hadn't heard exactly what had happened, but while he's training, he's on the ice, he's with the team, he's getting his bearings in Raleigh. He's doing the training, and blammo, a man who has I don't want to say a reputation of being injured, but he's had some injury difficulties in his career, injured again, and fans everywhere, myself included, who were very excited to see him join the team right from the hop, thinking about all of the different ways that Rod was going to flip the lines and where does he fit in. We were already, there's that eager anticipation, let out a big all at once groan. Patches having to get surgery, and now probably not joining the team until March. And I said, Brad, I don't know, do you have it on you? Because I'll say it myself, what I texted you immediately. But it was I have to admit that I'm very suspicious of a lot of things.
I do have it in front of me.
There you go. So I'll let you go ahead. I don't know what you thought when I sent it to you immediately, but I was really, this is my frustration text to you. So fire away.
Quote, "You serious? I hope that's a blankety blank lie," end quote. which was better than my one word response on Twitter, which was also not something we would normally say on the show. But
no, we wouldn't. And then then immediately, and then I'll go further because I went one step further, and it'll sound like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat when I quote this. So my question, this is my text quote. So my question now is this: did the Knights trade damaged goods, or did Waddell make this deal knowing it would be a way to use a loophole for the LTIR most of the season?
Yeah, and I remember. Luckily, I don't think it's either. Although this is the Vegas funk that exists with injuries and management made this happen. I don't know how, but there's some. I don't know if somebody's cursed Vegas or what it is, but this is definitely a Vegas problem.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a torn Achilles is just, I mean, you can't walk with one, much less skate, right? It's, I mean, hugely painful. I mean, it's a ligament, so slow to heal. The Kane said expected recovery time is 6 months. We've seen all kind of speculation about how can you know the recovery time before the surgery happens. And well, if they know how bad the damage is, they have estimates, right? I think 6 months is awfully aggressive for this. With my limited, but I did spend 10 years in an emergency medical capacity. And if we see him for the playoffs, I'm psyched. Because this is, the scale of this is more like 6 months to a year. Now, Patches is kind of known to be a pretty fast healer. A lot of guys in pro sports are, because their bodies are just so well tuned. They take good care of themselves. However, the all-star break return, I don't think is really feasible, nor this is not an injury you want to rush him back from. If he's available in April, in May, or not until the playoffs, Don has said we're not going to just do the Kucherov thing and just LTIR him for the whole year, but they're going to LTIR him. They need the cap space. The difference here is, and what I think people need to think about is, we're going to talk a little bit about potential replacement players. I would not replace him right away, because it's not how you start, it's how you finish. I don't care if we come in 8th in the East and barely squeak into the playoffs. If everybody's healthy and is gung-ho ready to go for the playoffs, that's all I care about. I don't care about winning the President's Cup. I care about winning a Stanley Cup, right? For people who don't know, and I probably will get this wrong myself, LTIR isn't like this like fake money. It's not like his cap hit goes away. You still have the same amount of cap space. You still have the same amount of spent. LTIR allows you to go over the cap by a certain amount of money, okay? The longer we don't spend money on a replacement, that money is sitting there accumulating, waiting to be spent, right? So you could bring in a player today. We're 1.116 million over the cap. So you could bring in a player today for like 5.8 million and have them play the year as long as Patches doesn't come back before the playoffs. Or you don't do anything and you bring that play, you just let that LTIR money just sit there and accumulate until, January, until the trade deadline. Then you can bring in a 7 million, you can bring in a guy with a higher hit, because you're not burning through that cap money throughout the whole season. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you can accumulate all that money and then bring in a really nice, expensive first line guy and put Patches on the second line and then really shuffle things up. So I think for anybody who thinks that the Hurricanes are definitely making a move to replace Patches, I don't think that's correct, especially now that Marty Necas has signed, because he doesn't really fit into your bottom six well anywhere. He should fit into the top six if he goes back to playing like we know he can play. So you're not in any imminent danger of like being out of the playoffs, right? I mean, I know a few people I trust who really know hockey are worried about goal scoring. I don't disagree with them, but goal scoring wasn't an issue until the last couple of months of the season. And by that point, the Hurricanes will have made a decision, right, about how they're going to play this. But for the first, at least until the new year, I don't see any reason to make some big move for another scorer. Jarvis is a year older. Aho's a year older. Svechnikov is a year older. Necas should not have the same, even if he has the same half as last year, that'd be great. It was the second half where he was problematic, right? Not the first.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on around this Patches injury. Just know that LTIR isn't like, it's not like that money comes off the books. It's just money that can accumulate that you can spend over the cap, which the Hurricanes could do. If Patches is ready to play in March, expect him to come back in March, and that will affect how much cap space there is. But the longer Waddell can wait to replace Patches, the more money in effect he's going to have to spend. So personally, I wouldn't do anything right now. I've seen Kane's name thrown out there. I've seen Kane's name thrown out there. A few other people have come up. Like there are a few of those people I just don't want because they're just terrible people. Like they're terrible human beings. Sorry if that's important to me. I know for many people listening, it's not important to them as long as they can play hockey. Personally, I don't separate those two things that much. I just can't. Phil Kessel is one that kind of sort of fits. He was traditionally a goal scorer. Since he's been in Arizona, I made the point with, I think it might have been Future Canes, that like he's not scoring goals anymore. And he brought up a good point. Like, is that because he's in Arizona or because he's lost his edge, right? Because he's getting older. Like, that's a guy who maybe you bring in, but his last contract was for $8 million. And he's not an $8 million guy anymore. And he's a free agent still, which means nobody else thinks he's an $8 million guy. So, like, if you can get him for a steal, yeah, then maybe I take a shot on that, right? But I don't think the need is there to rush into anything. That's the basic point of view I want people to know, is that there is no urgency in replacing Patches right now. Take your time, do a good deal, not a quick deal.
Daniel, what did you think? What did you think when you heard the news? And then what do you think the strategy is here? Like we're going to make you the GM. Daniel Wagner, you're the GM. First of all, what was your reaction when you heard about the injury, and how would you handle this?
Well, I thought it was really bizarre because it was all of a sudden, obviously the injury had happened earlier in the morning and they kind of kept it under wraps and already released like a surgery date and everything whenever they made it official that he was injured. So I was kind of, I can give a little better backstory. So I'm a huge Miami Marlins fan. If you know anything about the Miami Marlins, if you want to really test your heart, just become a fan of the Marlins or, Pittsburgh Pirates, so, obviously this coming off a trade, I think back to the only time in professional sports that a trade was ever returned, which is the Marlins, 2016, right-handed pitcher Colin Ray to San Diego in exchange for prospect Luis Castillo. That was the trade. They traded for him and Andrew Kashner. Well, whenever Ray came out, pitched within he got pulled within like the first 2 or 3 innings, and they found out he had an injury, and they were like, hey, San Diego dumped this guy on us. So the Marlins called him back and sent the guy back and got Luis Castillo back. And, looking at it now, as opposed to then, Luis Castillo is a star. So like, Jeffrey Loria, you're a crazy guy.
Yeah.
So, but we got Patches for future consideration. Do we get future consideration back and send Patches that way? Well, I mean, it's not going to happen. So they obviously don't have the cap space. They just signed a bunch of people there in Vegas. So I feel that most people, whenever they see Patches is injured, the thing that hurts the most for everyone is promise. You have the promise that this guy can come in and deliver all these goals. And whenever you see the promise taken away from you, and it's the same, even, I mean, I'm not a huge Oilers fan, but Ben Settler, he passed away recently. The super fan for the Oilers, the little kid that you saw during the playoffs. It's the promise of that kid's life that makes it so upsetting to everyone. And it's the same thing in sports whenever we get attached to players, or even just recently traded for players, is the promise of what they could bring. And whenever you see it snuffed out or put on hold, it really hurts. And I think that everyone is kind of in that shock, and they're like, I feel as though now we need to go out and do something. And for the Canes, I look at it as, why would you make a deal from a position of weakness whenever we can wait, evaluate the market, develop leverage, see a team that's in need of offloading somebody, or potentially has something that can be that spark in your roster if you need to spend the money. But at the same time, anything you take out, you ship out, or anything you bring in, you're going to have to ship someone out. Somebody that somebody likes is going to have to be gone. And it's probably not going to be the person that you're like, oh, we can get rid of this guy, because it never works that way. Because although you say we can get rid of this guy, are they somebody that someone else wants? So I just think the strategy is to wait.
Yeah, and here's the thing with this. I think it also gives the team an opportunity. A lot of the Chicago Wolves are licking their chops at the opportunity to really jump in. They've got an opportunity. There's one more empty space to fill. okay, for the start of the season, where they can make their impression and get up to the big team now and away you go, sort of thing. So it's going to be a really great opportunity for Rod and the organization to assess the players that they have on the farm who can come and step in. And no one is expecting anyone to be Max Pacioretty from the farm coming in for the first time or whatever. But it is, when you get your opportunity to shine, great things can happen. You see these young rookies come up and they become these amazing stars and stuff because they were finally given that chance. Look what Jarvis did. No one expected Jarvis to make the team at 19. Not only did he just made it impossible for them to send him down, and he just kept getting better. So I look at this as this is an opportunity to survey the situation. You know how great you'll be with Pacioretty. Now let's see what will happen, because we only have him for 1 year. It's like we get a look into the future a season early kind of thing. The question, though, that I have now, and this is kind of a half empty, half full situation I'm going to ask you, is the fact that he's not coming back until very late in the season good, because there's not so much tread on the tires and the grind that they experience over 82 games going into the playoffs, so he'd be fresh as a daisy? Or are you upset because he doesn't have the opportunity to develop the relationship and chemistry that a full season can bring a line? We all knew, and I'll use the as far as chemistry goes, the one line that was so amazing all season long and had chemistry was the third line last season that was never changed. It was put together at the start and it stayed that way the whole time, because you don't mess with something when it's not broken. And Stahl and Fost and Nino just meshed beautifully. And you can only really develop that over time, right? So what's your take? Do you like that it's not so much tread on, wear on the tires there, or do you wish he was back for chemistry things? And I'll go to you, Dan, and then we'll go to Brad.
With him coming back as a late return, I look at it as like a spark plug. If that was could be the positive jolt that you need to push yourself over the finish line. Like, it gives you something to circle on the calendar and go, as long as we survive until this date, we get Patches back, or Max Pacioretty, and we're gonna be better at this point. And I know I said before we started recording that we're not looking to win the season. We want to win the cup. So it doesn't matter how you get in, it just matters how you finish. And I think that getting the opportunity to get that life, that spark plug back on the ice whenever you need it the most, and then to start ramping up, because you don't want a team to peak too soon before the playoffs. You want them to peak right in time. And I think Max will be in time, or be back in time, just for that. But I also hope that he sticks around. He doesn't go back to wherever he's from. I think he's from Canada.
Yep.
Hope he doesn't go back. I hope he sticks around and that he mentors, because I feel as though that Necas and Jarvis and Aho, like everyone can absorb any knowledge that he can possibly share. So if he sticks around, does his recovery here in Raleigh, at least attends the home games and is a part of the locker room, I don't think the meshing is going to be that hard for him, because he's already going to have that personal relationship. The only thing he has to do is work it out in practice, because we know how Rod is. Until I see him practice, he's not ever going to get to play. So I have a feeling he'll be kind of like, 3 or 4 practices before he even sees game time.
What do you think, Brad?
I'm going to answer a little differently. I'm going to give you some names, and you tell me what they have in common.
Okay.
Sean Hill, Brett Hedican, Kevin Adams, Thomas Malek. That's group one. Group two, Doug Waite and Mark Recchi.
Okay, I know where you're going.
Any idea?
Well, Mark Recchi and Doug Waite were the additions very late in the 2005-2006 season that were absolutely key and imperative additions to the squad, which helped lift Lord Stanley in 2006. Without question, those acquisitions late in the season, right? They fit in, and because of their veteran status, they fit in right away. Like they found their niche, I guess, on the team.
Veteran presence.
Yeah, veteran presence. You're absolutely right.
So does that give you a clue about the other group that I mentioned?
Well, Sean Hill, you said Sean Hill, Kevin Adams, who's your favorite player.
Yep.
So I got to be careful if I don't want to say anything to besmirch him at all. I don't think there is besmirching him. So it was Hill, Malik, Hill, Adams. Who were the other two?
Sorry, yes. So Sean Hill was a little earlier, but then it was Brett Hedican, Kevin Adams, and Thomas Malek. And I'll give it to you.
Okay, please.
Sean Hill was acquired in late December of 2001, while Hedican, Adams, and Malek were picked up in January of 2002 as the trade deadline approached. On a team that went on to take the Detroit Red Wings to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
And I still think if they'd have won triple overtime game 3, could have won a cup.
Could have.
Patches is a veteran. He was injured 4 separate times last year for Vegas. So the most disappointing thing to me about his injury is that it's a non-hockey injury. Like, I expected him to get hurt sometime this year.
Right.
I just didn't think it was going to be in August.
Right.
But guys like Patches, I think Dan hit the nail on the head. If he hangs around the team, he's going to bond with those guys. He's going to watch those guys. He doesn't have to be on the ice with them. If he's watching them to start to get in their heads how they're thinking and what they're doing. And I think, and Dan put it so beautifully, the Hurricanes peaked last year. Unfortunately, we peaked from October to January.
Yeah.
Right? We started off and just ran through the league.
Yes.
And then fell off. And Patches being out until the end of the season gives you, if he comes back, that automatic boost you're going to need. I can remember Sean Hill on the I think it was the Raising Cane's 2002, in review DVD saying, he walked in that first day in the locker room and all the faces were down. And he's like, "Hey, like, what's going on, boys? Like, let's go win a cup." I don't see the problem here. And Patches coming back can give a team that kind of boost. So, like I said, my biggest thing was I expected him to get hurt. Can't believe it's a non-hockey injury. That bugs me more than anything, is he was just out skating and just probably took a bad step. Just it's one of those things that doesn't take much sometimes.
Yeah.
But the Achilles is kind of an important thing that you need. And so I'm not worried about it because it's a long season. It's 82 game regular season. Don's going to be watching from the get-go. If he sees that they need to bring somebody in, he'll bring somebody in. But if he sees that things are going pretty well and maybe they're second in the Metro, maybe third, and he's not too worried about it, sit and wait, because the longer he waits, the better deal, the better position he's going to put the team in to not just get a good deal, but to bring in the right guy. You know what I mean? I know, I mentioned Phil Kessel earlier. The other name that's come up is Sonny Milano, who would be a much cheaper person to bring in. Certainly not going to be, you're maybe a top 3, guy. But that kind of move I could see as an interim move. Like we just want to put ourselves in a good position and still have space to maneuver. I'd be fine with something like that. But I think Patches being out it is what it is. It's like the new to me, when somebody gets a new car and they go, "Oh, it's new, I got a new car." Like, "Oh," and they're like, "Well, it's new used." But to them, it's new, right?
Yeah.
And Patches was one of our 2 shiny new things. Brent Burns was at WWE, I think it was last night. People were loving that. So that's one of those, patches is the other new shiny toy that we get. We never even got to play with it. It's broken.
Yeah.
But it will heal.
It will.
Right?
I mean,
that's the thing, y'all.
He will heal. And I certainly would I mean, I was so disappointed, but you know what? You're right. That veteran leadership. I mean, I see the other aspect of this. I was talking about, an opportunity to build chemistry. The other side of that was there are so many combinations that Rod would have to find out who the best connection is. And you'd like to see that develop over time rather than a really forced, quick, in-game decisions all the time to tinker and stuff like that. You want to see who he plays best with. I mean, we've kicked out a number of different line opportunities already, Brad, and there's still a bunch more that could develop over time. I mean, we don't even know how Kasha is with the team now. So how do we,
Right. I mentioned the kind of superstar names. I didn't even mention, Kasha and Peterson and Coughlin and Drury might be up and Chatfield might be up. And
well, yeah. What about Nazen? Right.
We're a better team on paper than we were at the start of last season, in my opinion.
Yep. No question.
That's
no
the
question. Now, it wasn't all bad news, right? It wasn't all bad news last week because as Brad predicted, once again, from Brad's mouth, straight to Mr. Waddell, he knew exactly what was going to happen. He predicted it perfectly. Oh, Brad. Necas signed.
I was a little off. I thought he would maybe get just under $3 million because but I did have the ballpark right. I did say it was going to be between what 2.5 and 3, and I was right there.
There you go. And so Daniel, what do you think? What did you think of the signing for Necas?
I mean, Don pretty much said, a deal's going to happen, and it's going to happen. Obviously, you got to see what all's in your money purse before you can go out there and spend. So Necas was kind of like, he can't sign anywhere else. We're just going to wait until we see how much money we have left after the arbitration cases. And, I felt that the money is right for Necas. The bridge deal's right. It gives him the opportunity. It takes the weight off of his shoulders, because last season, it definitely looked at times that he was trying too hard to do too much. And then at other times, he was not doing very much at all, because whenever I watch Necas, because it seems like any night that people were like, oh, Necas had a good night, and they were watching him on television, because on the way home, I'm listening to them talk about him on the radio. But I have a seat in PNC Arena and I'm watching Necas. And I saw where, Brendan Smith or Ian Cole would jump up into play because Necas is just standing there looking like he's just watching the play develop, and your defender jumps into the play. And I don't know what Rod's told Marty, like what he's supposed to be doing in that situation. Because, I mean, I only got to watch him play for 13 games of the season prior to the playoffs, and then all the playoff games. So I'm like, shouldn't he be, even whenever you see the defender jump in, you don't really see Necas start to float back like Jordan Stahl does to play defense. Because it's like, why aren't you just going over there to help them get the puck, take control? So sometimes I see a lot of hesitation from him, but I don't know if he's in his own head too much and he's just not focusing on, like, let's just play. Like, this is a fun game. This is what you've spent your whole life harnessing, these skills that do this. Just play the game carefree and, leave it out on the ice. And that's how I want to see Necas play. I think 2.5 million this year and 3.5 million next year, very reasonable. I know he's looking for that big paycheck. And I hope he gets it. But I mean, he gets the opportunity now to play with a really good team and to show that he's worth it. And then, as everyone knows, he wants to play center. He wants to be the guy that's running a line. So, show me you can play wing, step up, and then whenever you get your opportunity, take advantage of it to play center if that's your natural position. But until the team needs you at center, like, you need to do what the team needs. So you got to be a good follower before you can be a leader, and that's what Necas needs to focus on, at least for this year.
I think you're 100% right. The big thing for me with Necas at center goes back to the other thing you said, which is he's only 23, and he's got the skills. There is no doubt that kid's got hands and feet made for hockey, but sometimes his brain turns off, and the position on the ice where your brain cannot turn off is goalie for one, and then your centers. As far as the forward group goes, the centers driving the bus, right? Like, he's the one who should be creating, making things happen. And the drop passes to nowhere just are infuriating. And the occasional indecision of, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. And some of that will get better, I think, as he gets older and he just plays more in the NHL. I'm hoping that that's not going to limit him, because I'm fine trying him at center. The Hurricanes traditionally don't start young guys at center. They start them at wing. Then you learn the game, and when you're up to speed, we'll move you to center. And Nate just needs to, if he wants to play center, he needs to prove that. He needs to show that he is a better number 2 center than KK, because he's not going to take over for Aho anytime soon. So Nate just has a path to center, and it's through KK if he wants to get serious minutes. Could he be a center on a lower line? Sure, but then you're kind of wasting some of that talent, right? You're wasting some of that speed and some of those hands. And the one thing I will say about Necas, though, he started off the season pretty strong. I think a lot of us forget that he got put in a concussion protocol right before Christmas. And I think because it happened, I think on the 20th or 21st, I know I forget, because I think that just, with my work schedule and home and kids, like, that just kind of rolls into Christmas. And I just, that's a blur, right? And I'm not thinking hockey. But he was out in concussion protocol, and when he came back, was never quite up to speed. As I recall, and I could certainly be wrong, I feel like he came back and then was out again briefly.
I think he got hit with COVID as well. It was kind of a back-to-back.
Yeah. So, you never know how guys are going to react to a concussion, even one that seems mild. It's the fear of getting hit sometimes is enough to change the way they play. I'm glad they kept Necas. I hope he has a great year. If he plays well and can move up the center, great. Although we're still deep at center. We don't need centers. So, I remember somebody on Twitter said something like, like his agent needs to demand he plays center. And it's like, that's not how this is going to work, because the answer from Dom will be absolutely not. Like, you have zero chance of dictating where you're going to play to me. And Rod Brindamore is not going to put up with that either. But I'm glad to see Necas back. I like the term, if he plays well, he'll get his payday. If he doesn't play well, then he won't. That's what a bridge deal's for. Go ahead, Dan.
So during my time, over 21 years of being in the military, there was one thing that I figured out, and I was never where I wanted to be. I was always where I needed to be. So if Necas just takes the mindset of, they need me here, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. And whenever the opportunity comes and they need him at center, he'll be ready for it, because he's already shown them that he has the capacity to do what the team needs, and not so much as an individual need.
Brindamore hockey, right? Brindamore one. Before I let you answer, because I want to hear from you, Ray. Fun fact: Dan said his first game was Arizona versus the Hurricanes, right? Halloween night. Guess who scored the first Hurricanes goal in that game?
Well, it wasn't Necas, was it?
It was Marty Necas. Followed up by the game winner by Brett Pesce. Just, I don't know. I looked it up. I was like, I wonder who scored that goal.
Yeah,
did Jarvis score that night? No. Marty Necas scored the very first live goal that Dan got to see.
Jarvis had an assist, and then Jarvis's first goal was on Fleury in Chicago.
100% correct. He had the second assist on Brett Pesce's game-winning goal,
which was actually kind of funny, because it was like a puck handling miscue that just went in between Fleury's, like in the
I remember that was a funny one.
A gaff on his part for sure, and it turns out everything comes up Millhouse. for Necas, it's funny that Kokaniemi's name comes up because people's evaluations of KK are they've been harsh, but a lot of people point out he has this firm belief that he is actually a center, and he was kind of shoehorned into the wing, and he's been shoehorned to the wing for a long time, and he is more of a natural center type situation, and I don't want to say a fish out of water, but to hear the same sort of things being said about Necas, it's just interesting that this is the same type of problem. They have at least that connection in that regard, where maybe not playing to their full potential, maybe because they're not in their natural position or where they believe they could be their best. Necas, I can't even tell you. I mean, I'm happy with the signing. I'm absolutely happy with the signing for a couple of reasons. Number one, love the talent. I'd love to see him with this prove it, and it's a prove it contract. Okay, there's no question. It's a prove it. Show us what you got, and now's the time. All right, so it's like, let's get at it. So I love that he will have that opportunity to do so in a Canes jersey, but I also love that it's a contract that could be tradable when
he's an asset. I mean, I know we come back to talking trading the kid, but like he's got upside. So if it's not working here, you blew my mind with the KK point because you're 100% right. KK plays better at center than wing. He just does.
Yeah.
Maybe Nate just is the same, but if that's the case, Carolina may not be the destination for him.
Exactly. And so, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's funny when you see, I mean, I'll be able to describe it to you, and you know the goal that I'm talking about. I can't remember who it was against, but when Nate just flies down the right wing and blows past the defender, but has gotten to the end boards too quickly and can't cut to the front of the net, he swings around the back of the net in a wraparound goal that you just go, wow, that speed, that puck handling ability. I mean, when you see that type of skill, when you see those laser shots, I mean, he was a thorn in Tampa's side last year. Overtime winners twice, I believe, against Tampa. One for sure overtime winner, but he's got this skill, and he's oddly enough beating one of the best goaltenders in the league. He's not beating a backup goaltender. He's playing really well. So I'm glad to have him aboard, but the fact that it's a prove it contract and he could be dealable, down the line, I think that's also great too.
Options are good.
Options are always good.
I love our players, but I've always said there's not too many. We said last week I went through UFAs. Out of all the UFAs in the next 3 years, there was like 3 people I said we have to keep.
Yes,
and that's not many. Like those, it's not that I don't love the other guys, but if you want to win a cup,
I mean, I just think people should look at the disparity of time on ice between KK and Necas and look at the production, because if you looked at the efficiency, KK is on a good pace efficiency rating on that last pairing, on the last line, with not necessarily all the tools around him. Necas has, I mean, normally whenever I saw him, he was either paired with Svechnikov, or I've saw him a couple times on Stahl's line. I mean, we moved him around to try to get him going, and it didn't seem like it was going to happen. And we, like Rod and them, they trust him a lot. They give him a lot of minutes, and it's only right that KK gets minutes. And there's a lot of people that hate KK because they feel as though he's the reason why Trocheck left. But I mean, term is why Trocheck left. It wasn't KK. Everyone knows it's term.
And when, I believe with Kotkaniemi's ability or opportunity to play center, I think he's going to get a chance to. He's been begging to play center for the longest time, and once he gets this opportunity, he's not going to miss out. Brad, a lot of what we do here in the Storm Cellar, you kind of drive the bus online and in our social media, and you had a little bit of fun earlier in the week and put out a poll for our fans to chime in on. Set it up for us. Tell us all about it here.
Yeah, me and a bud we're talking NHL tough guys. Not cheap shot, not the Brad Marchands who will cheap shot you but won't fight you. Who's tough? Not necessarily fighters, although that certainly played into at least my thinking. So I just put out there who was the toughest Whaler Hurricane of all time, and it was hard to get down to 4 choices because that's what Twitter limits you to. But the ones I came up with, I thought I came up with a pretty good list. Timmy Gleason, who had I think he may have the most fights in Hurricanes Whalers history, maybe. Stu Grimson, the Grim Reaper, NHL legend, one of my favorites. Jesse Boulerice, who didn't throw all that many fights. He wasn't here a long time, but was just, in terms of a tough guy, my goodness. They didn't come a lot tougher than him. And then another one who kind of fits into a couple categories, right? He was tough. He was also perhaps one of the most hated players ever in the league. He was also kind of a cheap shot guy, but Ulf Samuelsson. So Stu played for both the Whalers and the Hurricanes. I can't remember, was Ulf here? I think Ulf was here in 97. I'd have to look that up. I don't remember
really?
If Ulf came. I could 100% be wrong about that.
I don't remember him coming back because
that's right. He was gone. So yeah. So Stu is the only guy who played for both, right? Okay. Ulf is, from the Whaler days. Timmy and Jesse were from the Hurricanes. With 100, I think it was 140 votes, Timmy Gleason and Stu Grimson tied at 35%.
Wow.
No surprise. Any of 4 of those. Jesse Boulerice was kind of the long, he was definitely the maybe second tier guy. Ulf Samuelsson got 25%. And I think some of this I think is based upon who the people who follow us, and a lot of them are newer hockey fans. They probably don't know Ulf as well, or even Stu. Timmy Gleason obviously is now with the team as a coach and is definitely a tough guy. Would not mess with Timmy. But yeah. I thought that was really interesting that Stu got as many votes as he did, because if you don't know Stu, if you weren't around for that era, you would definitely have to look him up to kind of see, what kind of guy he was. And he was the guy. I always loved the story, and I've probably told him on the board, on the broadcast before. And he skates over to the bench, and one of the Whalers got cheap shotted, and he's on the bench, and he's taking off his pads. He's taking off his elbow pads, and he's taking off in to show, he's like slipping his shoulder pads and everything off. And the guy beside him's like is a rookie. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I got work to do." And he skates out there to puck drop, boom, fight, because he wanted to, he wanted the flexibility and freedom of movement. So he's just on the bench taking all his pads off. He's like, because he's not going to get his shift in. He's just going to go out there and whoop somebody's butt. Great story.
That is a great story.
Honorable mentions. Sean Hill's name came up.
Yeah.
Sean was a tough dude, but I don't think of him amongst the franchise's toughest. But honorable mention to him, Craig Adams. People may not remember. Craig Adams was a tough dude, and he would drop the gloves. That's a guy that I think people forget. Another blast from the past, kind of named Darren Langdon, was tough, big tough dude. And Tim Conboy. If you are a newer Canes fans and don't know about Tim Conboy, that guy was as rough and tumble as they come. That's a good one. I'm sure there's YouTube, Tim Conboy fights out there. That's another guy to maybe just, if you got a little time, you want to learn about, franchise history a little bit for the Canes, go back. Tim Conboy, that might be a name that you might want to know. But thank you to everybody who voted. We'll come up with some more of those, because I'm not trying to pit Whalers versus Hurricanes necessarily, but when I think about records, I look at the franchise history, right? And that was one of those that it just came out of a discussion with a friend of mine, and we're just going through listing off tough guys we knew. And I was like, there's like quite a few names on this list, like especially Whalers. I don't know if I can even honorable mention to Gordie Howe. Gordie was old by the time he got to the Whalers, and he's still one of those guys where you read the stories and it's like nobody wanted to mess with Gordie, even when he was like in his 40s, right?
No, 100%. I mean, it's the Gordie Howe hat trick, right? Which was a goal, an assist, and a fight. Yeah. I mean, that was how he was.
He actually didn't do it that often himself. Did you know that?
I know it's weird that they pinned
you may have
him.
taught me that actually.
Well,
but it's named after him. But it's not something he actually did that much.
Yeah,
like he did them, just not together.
He had He had some big hits in the day.
Like, even if you messed with his kids whenever they're on the ice with him, like
because we had Gordie, and two sons all in the Whalers before they moved.
Yep.
Yep.
I have his autograph of that picture of him posing with his sons all together, and it's an amazing story that photo. Maybe we'll share for another time. I'm going to throw a couple of names at you from the Whale, and Brad, I'm shocked that you didn't throw his name out. You're wearing the man's jersey.
So Dino is one of those guys who I think of as a tough guy, but I still, when my first thought for Kevin Dineen goes to leader.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, totally. Not that he wasn't tough, but when I think of, my first thing is like, that guy led the team, right? Like, this is my team. I'm taking it under my wing. I'm running with it. Not that he wasn't tough, but when you think Stu Grimson, like, the first thing that comes out of your mind should be like, that's the Grim Reaper, right?
Yeah, that I think.
But you're right. Another honorable mention should certainly go to Kevin Dineen
for sure. Like, it's funny. Looking at the list that you have, I kind of look at that as enforcer, right? Like, who is the best enforcer of all time, of all time? And then, like you said, there's guys like Brian Marchment, who not a lot of people liked, but he was a guy that liked to, and he was kind of dirty too. He was like Ulf Samuelsson light. You know what I mean? I have his autograph as well, by the way. But it was. When I think of toughness, I think of the guys that are just gritty, just work so hard, and they actually lead through their toughness. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I thought. There's another name that I'm going to throw out there. This might surprise you. I'm going to give his nickname, the little ball of hate. Do you remember Pat Verbeek?
I was just going to say, as soon as you said that, I'm like, it's Pat. Yes. Pat, not as well as I know the others by any stretch, but
you don't come by a nickname, the little ball of hate. Just, Ray Ferraro was also kind of called that as well. Like, it's just, they play so tough. Great scorer. Verbeek could score. He could do everything. But man, oh man, Pat Verbeek, he was one of my favorites because of that toughness style, the way he played. I mean, oh man, you're taking me down the.
Love it. And so Dan just asked in chat about like penalty minutes versus toughness. In my mind, Dan, it wasn't necessarily about penalty minutes, because like there are a lot of good fighters in the NHL. And I don't know, not that they're not tough, but like, to me, the tough guys were like, when Ulf is on the ice, the other team is like, don't do anything on the shift. Like, Ulf's on the ice, you don't need the penalty minutes to scare the other team from doing something. And that's, in my mind, what I was going to was like, when these guys are on the ice, is the other team on their best behavior? And that's kind of what was going through my head anyway. But I phrased it in such a way that people could define it however they wanted to, right?
The game has definitely changed a lot from then to now. I mean, even
no question.
Even like I saw a highlight on Twitter the other day of Steve Yzerman getting nailed. I mean, pretty much he got clipped, skates taken out from under him, but he flipped the puck behind him, and someone went and scored. And instead of calling the penalty, they were like, well, there's no reason to give him a penalty shot. That we're good to go here. So it's completely different on how they call penalties and, what toughness is. I mean, because I'm going to be honest with you, Stevie Lawrence, I'm going to throw his name out there for his only fight.
Yeah, you know what? And here, you were so right about how much the game has changed. I'm going to take you back to the 80s when the Edmonton Oilers top line was, of course, Wayne Gretzky. Where wouldn't he be, right? On his wing, Yari Curry. And on the other side of him, Dave Semenko. And you're thinking, Dave, what? The man was probably, he was one of the meanest, baddest fighters. Like, he was so tough. And that was one of those things where, like you said, Brad, he's on the ice now, you steer clear, and he created space. He wasn't there for his scoring. No. He was ready to just chuck knuckles when needed to and make sure no one messed with the two best players on the team. And that just doesn't happen anymore. That really doesn't happen anymore. Yeah. You do not see that enforcer rule. Man, this has been so much
I think of Marty
fun.
McSorley protecting Wayne Gretzky. Like, so that the big Gretzky trade from Edmonton happened many years ago, 3 days ago now.
Yes.
And I always like to say that that wasn't the trade that sent Wayne Gretzky to LA. That was the trade that sent one Marty Jelena to Edmonton. Yeah. And Wayne was just a throw-in.
And oh my God.
ESPN has a beautiful documentary on that. So
I have to check it out. We're gonna wrap things up, but very quickly, I just need to throw something in. And this is off the script, so I apologize, guys. Earlier this week, there was announced, this has nothing to do with the Hurricanes, but earlier this week, information was revealed. We found out that a Toronto Maple Leaf great, Boreas Salming, announced that he has ALS. And I have to tell you that it's terrible news. ALS has shown its face in my family, and it's not good, not at all. And Boreas Salming was an amazing player who played on some very terrible Toronto teams in the 70s, but his extreme talent matched equally by his work ethic. An amazing player who, back in the day, European players, right? They didn't have necessarily the best reputation. They were frowned on way back when. They were like, I don't know what the deal was. The man was outstanding. And I remember watching him with, Sittler and McDonald and on those Leaf games, and watching on Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday nights here, and seeing him out there on the ice, he was flawless. He was Nicholas Lidstrom before Nicholas Lidstrom. I mean, Boreas Salming, just amazing, and it's terrible news. And, I don't believe they're listening to the program, but I'm wishing him and his family all the best for what's to come. And it was just important for me to make sure we threw that out there. It was tough news. It really stunk hearing that. But we'll end on a happy note now. Daniel Wagner, thank you so much for joining us in the Storm Cellar. We always love having guests.
Great show.
You did a great job today. Love having you aboard. And here's hoping that you're part of the reason why the Hurricanes, you might be the good luck charm, right?
I hope so.
You get on board, and we're playing well and doing great. We see bigger and better things to come.
I look
and reward you.
I look at last year as the exception, not the norm. I mean, mainly because I don't like being a longtime Marlins fan. Like, I don't want to get my hopes up and get crushed. So,
there you go. No, you know what?
There's
always defended myself.
It's so great to have you aboard. We're very, very happy. I guess now that we've covered Pacioretty and Necas and the poll and we've gone down the history road there, Brad. Is there anything left to say?
Always. Go Canes.
Go Canes.
Go Canes.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. Ray and I greatly appreciate your support in helping us produce an informative and fun podcast. As always, we'd like to say that we believe hockey is for everyone. Whether you're a Caniac or a bunch of jerks, doesn't matter, as we're just a couple of jerks anyway. We would love to hear your questions, comments, and suggestions. We will do our best to answer anything hockey related. You can reach us via email at stormcellar97@gmail.com. On Twitter, we are at stormcellar97, and on Facebook at facebook.com/stormcellar97.